A very warm welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Mark Owen. Uganda's legislation that outlaws identifying as LGBTQI is receiving widespread condemnation. US President Joe Biden, for instance, has spoken out to describe the new law as shameful. Biden, who is himself a practising Roman Catholic, a religion that says homosexuality is a sin, says Uganda's new legislation could very well harm US-Uganda relations. Sanctions is one of the words that's being bandied about. Before Biden's words were uttered, the law had been condemned quite roundly by the United Nations as the worst of its kind in the world. Well, our panel to discuss the issues relating to this new law passed by Uganda, which has clearly sent fear among the community, but raised the interest of other countries that still criminalise homosexuality in Africa. Let's bring you the panel then. Flora Bulter from the Fondation Jean Jarvis, where she's co-director of the LGBTQI Observatory. Flora, thank you so much for being with us.
Very welcome.
Joining us from afar in Marseille, Mounir Bartour, a lawyer and co-founder of Shams, which is an LGBTQI support group. Mounir is a former candidate for president in Tunisia. Mounir, thank you, sir, for being with us very much indeed.
Happy to meet you.
Excellent. In Nairobi, Kenya, Christian Rumu, Amnesty International's campaigner for the Great Lakes region of Africa. Thank you very much for being with us. And we have joining us Gracie Brenda, who is co-founder of Diverse Empowerment Foundation. Gracie Brenda, thank you very much for joining us here on the France 24 debate. Before I let the panel loose to get some opinions and some analysis, let's set the scene. This report by Liam McGuinn.
One of the world's toughest anti-LGBTQ laws, ratified on Monday, the news was announced in a tweet by the Speaker of the Ugandan Parliament.
His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, has executed his constitutional mandate as prescribed by Article 91 of the 1995 Constitution and assented to the Anti-Homosexuality Act 2023.
The
Flora,
Anti-Homosexuality Act prescribes the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, which includes sexual relations between HIV-positive people of the same sex, but also a 20-year prison sentence for the so-called promotion of homosexuality.
I think that's the last nail in the coffin, because you see we've been targeted well long before, even when those bills have not been initiated. Since it has been signed, then that means people are going to be jailed, other people are going to be murdered.
Uganda has been ruled by Yoweri Museveni since 1986. Homosexuality in the country is already illegal and punishable by life imprisonment. The legislation also enjoys widespread popular support, which explains the lack of reaction from the opposition. A number of human rights organisations fear that this legislation will serve as an example for other countries.
So yeah, this bill, as is signed now into law by President Museveni, is having real consequences on the LGBTQ individuals in Uganda, but also across the region.
A few hours after the bill was signed into law, the European Union reacted by describing the anti-gay law as deplorable, and the United Nations has condemned it as the worst of its kind in the world.
Let's get into the issues here with our panel. Flora, can I bring you in first? Flora Bulter from the Fondation Jean Jarvis, co-director of the LGBTQI+ Observatory. Your basic reaction to what Uganda is doing?
Well, it's basically horror, but it's something that we've seen coming for quite a long time. There was a first law which was annulled by the Constitutional Court in 2014, I believe. So there was already this desire to go even further in the repression of homosexuality and to be one of the worst countries, if not the worst countries, in terms of criminalization of same-sex relationships. This particular piece of legislation has been discussed since March. It has garnered a lot of support from the MPs, obviously. I should say that in 2014 it was annulled on a technicality, which is that there were not enough MPs present to vote the actual text. So this time around, this is not going to happen. So hopefully there will be a discussion on the merits with relations to the in relation to the constitutional principles of non-discrimination and rule of law. So there are many issues, of course, in terms of legal ramifications, and there has been a significant battle by very courageous activists, lawyers, and journalists who are still fighting. We should not let them down. But it is, of course, very worrying, and it's something that has been going on for quite some time. And it's also an expression of an increased politicization, as they say in French, which is totally a horrible word, but it's a néologisme à la française. The fact that homosexuality is being used as a division tool, as a core, as a hot issue on which to divide people and create panics and build consensus on the basis of hatred.
And indeed, the expression "all's fair in love and war" comes to mind. If you sort of substitute war for politics, you might sort of get to the bottom of the matter. The actual law as it's been passed, though, and let's put this into the minds of the viewers, it's a little bit watered down compared to what it was going to be like.
Yes, it's only very slightly, though, and it has the one that was discussed in March was not vetoed. It was the president asked for Parliament to check the limitations and see and to tone it down, but it is not significantly changed, and it is still very worrying. We've had a very worrying series of months as well, where we've had international workers who have been arrested and tried, people who were working against AIDS and just in UN-backed campaigns against AIDS, who have been arrested. And,
this is UN workers
yes.
gone there to help. Were homosexual and were targeted by the authorities?
It's people who were working in the field and who were international, who were not themselves from Uganda, who were arrested. That was in April, I believe, and 5 or 6 of them, and they were tested. So-called tested, which is, of course, a very violent way to phrase things, to check whether they were homosexuals. And this is a very worrying sign, because it's also a sign that beyond Ugandans and beyond a society that is in itself extremely homophobic, though there is also a vast precedent before colonialism for widespread acceptation and, toleration of LGBTI relationships and identities. But there is also this sign that is being sent to the world that we are against the imposition of UN, of human rights, of international Western, so-called Western values.
When you say they're tested, Flora, I'm trying to avoid asking a very detailed question, but I think we need to spell this out so people at home know what's been going on. Are we talking basically like physical assault?
Yes, well, probing.
Physical sexual assault?
Yes.
Put it that way.
Yes, in the framework of a so-called medical exam.
Okay, this is a distressing situation all round,
yes.
Clearly, and now it's obviously in law and obviously sacrosanct and set up down. Of course, the laws date back by origin to the time when Britain was the colonial ruler, so we're talking pre-1960, aren't we?
It was 1902, I believe.
That far back. Okay, Flora, take a pause, because we'll bring you back in very shortly. Let's go to our guests joining us from afar. First, I'll bring in from Marseille, Munir Batour from Shams, which is an LGBTQI support group. Munir, a former presidential candidate in Tunisia. Thank you for joining us. We heard what Flora's been talking about, the situation in Uganda. Give us your sense of what this means going forward for anybody who isn't in the category of being, shall we say, straight.
For us, this law is the worst law against gays against LGBT in the world, actually. Our most important revendication actually is moratorium for execution of penalty against homosexuals. We signed it as more than 60 organizations in Africa, LGBT organization, a petition to stop the execution of the penalty against gays in Africa, against LGBT in Africa. The emergency for us is not to delay laws against LGBT, but to stop the execution of penalty. It's the most important thing. Uganda actually is the most horrible country against LGBT people. We don't understand why we are that in Africa. The more than 30 countries in Africa penalize and criminalize homosexuality. You have an example in North Nigeria. There is a death penalty, like in Uganda, actually, and in Somalia. In Somalia, there is death penalty against homosexual. I think it's abnormal, and we are very angry about what's happening in Uganda and other African countries.
Munir, thank you for now. We'll get back to you very shortly. Munir Bator from the organisation SHAMS, which is an LGBTQI support group. And as we say, Munir has been also a presidential candidate in Tunisia. Munir, bear with us, please. Let's go to Nairobi in Kenya. Christian Rumu from Amnesty International's campaign there in the Great Lakes region of Africa. Christian, we saw you in our report briefly talking about the situation. Give us a sense of how you feel on the ground there about this development.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. If I may just clarify one point that was mentioned earlier on the 6 people who were forced, who were subjected to forced annual examination. So these are 6 peer educators who are linked with various health organizations that promotes safe sex conduct within the LGBTQ community. So these are 6 Ugandans who were subjected to annual examinations. So yeah, back to the question. Of course, we are very much concerned about this development. We had hoped that President Museveni would veto this bill, but now that is become a law. It is that now the government has basically institutionalized hatred. They've institutionalized discrimination and prejudice against the LGBTQ community in Uganda. And I think other colleagues might talk about this, but there is a sense of fear among the community right now, and rightfully so, because we have seen how every time there is a debate, every time there is a public debate around LGBTQ issues, there is a rise in incidents on targeted attacks against the LGBTQ individuals and persons in Uganda as well and across the region. So it's really a worrying development, and we really hope that the next step will also be positive in some way. But we keep hope, and we hope that the Constitutional Court is going to read the law and really focus and reaffirm the Ugandan constitution and its principles on non-discrimination and equal protection under the law.
Indeed, they are fine words, Christian. Our previous speaker was talking about the fact that there are some 30 African countries that still criminalise homosexuality. Just for comparison, you're in Kenya. Can you outline for us what the situation is there?
So the situation here as well is worrying because, as you know, right after when the bill was introduced in the parliament in Uganda, there was a parallel initiative that was started here in Kenya. One MP, again, just copying what has been happening in Uganda, pushing for a further criminalization of LGBTQ persons and LGBTQ conduct here in Kenya under the name of, protection of family. So the situation is tense. We've also seen, few targeted attacks against LGBTQ communities here in Kenya. We have seen organized protests led by some fractions of the religious leaders, in particular at the coasts, raging against what they call behaviors that are not in line with traditional family values. The more we are seeing those, the more we see the attacks against the LGBTQ persons. In Tanzania, recently, we are following the development on the targeted attack against a person who was self-identifies as LGBTQ person in the Arusha region. That person was killed, and we are really concerned that the investigation are not moving fast enough. And there in Tanzania as well, there have been demonstrations organized by some fringe of religious leaders, calling for the population to raise against homosexuality. There have been also debates at the parliament in Tanzania. So we see what has happened in Uganda is really gaining some momentum across the region as well.
Christian Romo, thank you very much indeed. Do bear with us, so we'll come back to you as soon as we possibly can. Just to remind you, we have Flora to hear from the Fondation Jean Jarvis, Munia Batur, who's in Marseille, Christian Romo in Nairobi, and joining us now is Gracie Brenda, who's co-founder of Diverse Empowerment Foundation. Gracie, thank you so much for being with us. I understand, Gracie, that you are from Uganda.
Yes, please.
And how do you feel then that, I'll say your government, it may not be your government, but how do you feel that your government has come up with this kind of law? Gracie, clearly having problems hearing us right now. We'll try to sort out a link to Gracie Brenda to get her.
I can hear you now.
Gracie, go ahead and tell us what you think.
I've not heard the question, though. I can hear you now, but I didn't hear what you asked.
Question is, I understand you're from Uganda, and I was wondering what you feel about the government creating and enforcing this kind of law.
I feel a lot, so I can't say in particular what I feel. But right now, it's just so sad and very dangerous for LGBTQ people in Uganda right now. So how we feel about why and everything that the world is looking at right now is not so much what we're feeling on ground, because as someone who is a co-founder of an organization, people are running and people are actually hurting other people right now. And maybe this is something that we did know would happen, but we did not expect the president to sign. We really thought that at this point he would have maybe had someone advise him about what was going to happen, especially to the LGBTQ people in the country. Because as we speak, my co-founder, their landlord evicted them because apparently people have been scouting for LGBTQ people as the bill was in parliament. So now that it's law, people feel like they can take it upon themselves maybe to to clean up the society, as they're calling it, and be cultural and maybe protect the children, apparently.
So Gracie,
it's now very dangerous.
If I understand, Gracie, what you're saying is that this law will lead to people basically acting as kind of self-appointed vigilantes who will go around and basically take action, violence, against anybody who is different in order to, as they put it, protect the children. Is that what you're saying?
It is no longer will. They are doing it right now.
Ah, okay.
So it's no longer the future. No longer something will happen. Worried about. It's now something that is happening currently. So it's very dangerous right now for every LGBTQ person in Uganda. And apparently now people are just advising themselves, like, I think this one is queer and all that. And people are running around. And it's their country too. It's our home too, and now it's not. It's like it's known because we're not safe. You cannot rent a house now. Landlords are evicting people because apparently they're also liable. If you're knowingly renting to a person who is LGBTQ, you're also liable. You can go to court and maybe pay a penalty or go to jail. So now the Vigilantes, the well-wishers, the people who want to clean up the country, are also outside waiting for them. So it's really no longer something that we're thinking is happening in future, but it's something that is actually on ground right now.
Gracie, I'm going to stop you there because we need to try to improve the link to you so we can see you and hear you clearly, because what you're saying is incredibly important. While we're trying to sort that out technically, I'll go to our other guests, but Gracie, please bear with us. Gracie Brenda from Diverse Empowerment Foundation, who is Ugandan, painting, I think, Flora from the Fondation Jean Jarvis, co-director of the LGBTQI Observatory. What she paints is a nightmare situation where we have a government that has put in place a law which seems to empower, in inverted commas, the public or whoever takes it upon themselves to basically victimize and attack anybody who is gay, lesbian, any kind of different.
Absolutely, this is not people targeting other people and acting as enforcers of homophobia. That is nothing new. But the government, there is a provision saying that anyone who allows homosexual acts to happen in a given location or somewhere that's under their responsibility is basically aiding and abetting and is facing, as Gracie just said, 5 years in prison or a very hefty fine. So that means that there is actually a government incentive. The government is incentivizing people to act as enforcers of the law by themselves and is discouraging people from having the most rudimentary respect for the human rights of LGBTI persons. That is extremely worrying, and it is both. It's of course part of what makes this law particularly horrible, and it makes it into a war of everyone against everyone. You know, of the whole society against LGBTI persons.
Indeed, I mean, Europe's not a perfect society. We're not standing here as two white people.
Oh, no,
in Europe
absolutely.
saying
I would even say that Europe has a very strong responsibility, or definitely Britain does, in establishing this situation and in the notions that colonialism brought about to traditional societies that were in no way as violent as they are today towards homosexuality, and that's something that's extremely important and that needs to be highlighted. It's also that the people who are the so-called religious people who are pushing for this law, like Pastor Nsempa, for instance, they're actively rehashing the elements from the American religious right. So this is also something that's a cultural importation from the West, let's say.
Flora, thank you. Let me pause you there. Let's bring in Munia Batour. He's in Marseille, co-founder of Shams, an LGBTQI support group. Munia, thank you. We're back with us. That's good. I can see you clearly. I hope the sound's okay for you. In terms of what we're talking about here is the idea of vigilantes now because of this law that's been passed in Uganda, taking it upon themselves to go and attack people who are gay or lesbian, a situation that I presume that you may not be surprised to hear is already happening.
I'm not surprised. We are waiting for this. We suppose this law will be voted in Uganda. I am here. I'm speaking as not as president of CHAMPS organization, but I am the representative of AWES network. It's this network represents more than 60 organizations, LGBT organization in Africa, and we are calling for boycott of Uganda. We are calling for economic penalty against Uganda. We call the Western world, United States and Europe, to make economic penalty against Uganda until they not delete this law.
So you'd be pleased to hear that Joe Biden's already spoken about that possibility.
Yeah, I heard for that. We hope they. We are waiting for a strong reaction from United States and from Europe against Uganda and against this law.
Munia Bator, for now, thank you very much indeed. Another disturbing angle to this story is that the 30 African countries that we've already kind of alluded to, who still criminalise homosexuality, are kind of impressed by what Uganda has done and maybe thinking about echoing that kind of legal structure in their own borders. James Vassner with this report.
Taking on the matter with Uganda's constitutional courts, lawyers and activists filed their petition against the country's new anti-LGBT laws.
The bill is blatantly unconstitutional. The bill, by criminalizing what we call consensual same-sex activity among adults, basically goes against key provisions of the Constitution, including violating the right to equality and non-discrimination under Article 20 and 21 of the Constitution.
Their petition, they say, highlights several flaws, such as the absence of LGBT people's views before the committee and bias shown by the Speaker in favour of the law.
The Anti-Homosexuality Act.
They fear the new legislation will lead to a rise in violence and that more people will flee the country, like these two gay men, who can't be named, who now live in Kenya.
We have been taken to the police. Then later on, they registered us, so the police started tracing us. So that's why, we scattered ourselves. Some of us, we went to Kenya. Some of them, I don't know the place where they are right now.
Meanwhile, there's concern that other countries across the continent could follow suit. Homosexuality is illegal in more than 30 states in Africa, and some are seeking to toughen their laws, drawing inspiration from Uganda.
We are delighted to know that Uganda has been able to set the pace. It is not an anti-LGBTQ law. I mean, if you take Ghana's perspective, it's anti-LGBTQ practices. There are specific practices that we're extremely concerned about.
Lawmakers in Ghana put forward a bill in 2021. It seeks to lengthen jail sentences and force some people to undergo therapy in an attempt to change their sexual orientation.
Listening to the religious gentleman there from Ghana, I'm kind of reminded of Pope Francis and his words about homosexuality, saying, "Who am I to judge?" Words to that effect, I think, was what the leader of the world's Catholics said. And of course, Catholicism supposedly still says that homosexuality is a sin. Let's bring in, for further comment from Nairobi, Kenya, Christian Rumu, Amnesty International's campaigner for the Great Lakes region of Eastern Africa. Christian, thank you for bearing with us. This idea that what we're seeing in Uganda is actually of interest to the other 30 countries that criminalise homosexuality. Do you feel there is a possibility of a domino effect?
Yes, absolutely. There is that possibility. And as I alluded to it a few minutes ago, It's literally when the debate started in Uganda, when an MP here in Kenya pushed for a bill of the same nature. So it's going likely to inspire more countries. Tanzania also had debates in parliament. MPs have raised their voices asking for further criminalization. But I also want to really recognize that there have been progress as well, as the first panelist was saying. There have been progress in Botswana, there have been progress recently in Namibia, Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda, who are taking policies that are more progressive. So I think it's very important to highlight those contrasts, also to show that yes, although there are countries where there is still resistance to inclusion and diversity, there are other countries that are embracing diversity and inclusion. So yes, there is that risk, but we hope that with the organizing on the ground and with the strengthening of the legal systems and the pressure from within, but also from outside, is going to help to not do further damage that are going to put a community that's already marginalized, further into pressure and horrific experiences.
Christian, you mentioned that progress, and you mentioned Botswana, among other places where there's been a move towards basically legalizing homosexuality. Places like South Africa, of course, are well in the vanguard, moving along those lines. Is the reality, though, in other countries that there is a kind of enriched, deepened prejudice, which is very much on the streets, in the schools, in the families, in the organizations, which basically will be an extremely hard thing to overturn?
Sorry, if I get well your question, I think that the homophobia or the homophobic sentiment,
yes.
So that's within society that is going to take some time to change. So I do believe it's very important, for the legal framework to change in a progressive way. But then the social behavior is going to follow suit, hopefully. But it's going to take a lot of effort. Civil society organizations are doing that already. If you look at, how the mothers of queer people in Uganda have mobilized to write to President Museveni, for instance. I've seen already another letter from mothers of queer people from South Africa writing a letter, calling for this law to be declared unconstitutional. So it's going to take a lot of effort to really move the society into, embracing the diversity and in a diverse, diverse society that we are as Africans. But that is going to take quite a while. And actions, initiatives like this is what is happening in Uganda are not really helping the society to move forward because they are really, getting us stuck into, issues that divide us rather than, building more cohesive and more cohesive societies.
Christian, bear with us, please. Thank you very much indeed for those remarks. Extremely interesting and very moving. And that idea that it takes time to change. Let me come back to you, Flora, here in the studio. We know it takes time to change because how long has homosexuality been decriminalized in many countries in Europe? And still there is, in some places and in some people and in some people's minds, blatant homophobia. And very offensively so.
That's very true. In France, decriminalization has happened broadly speaking, let's say, in 1982. So it's been slightly over 40 years. And we've seen the progress in those years. In 40 years, which is basically not even my lifetime, we have gone from criminalization to the recognition of couples and to equal-ish rights to marriage and family. There are still many issues, and we're still a long way away from equality, and certainly there are issues. But we have seen a very impressive rise in the number of people who get used to homosexuality once it becomes visible, because the end of the world does not happen, and because we are people and we are exactly the same. We're no better and no worse than anybody else, but certainly we're not figments of people's imaginations. We are living, breathing people, and making homosexuality legal, recognizing people, allows people to see that. So we've seen a very strong movement in France, certainly in the past 20 years or so, and it goes. It is very long, and it's still infuriating that there are so many things to be done. It's still infuriating that so many people have negative views on trans persons, for instance, even in France, or have no idea who intersex children and people are in general. So we still have a long way to go, but it does take a long time, but it does happen, and that's, I think, the message that we also need to bear in mind, and that is on the same lines as what Mr. Rumus was saying earlier on, is that we also need to bear in mind that yes, change does happen, positive change, and that there are not only bad signs. I think even in Uganda there was, I believe there was a Pew Research survey many years ago, probably 10 years back, on the vision that people in Uganda had of homosexuality, which was very negative. It was like 96% negative. ILGA has worked a few years after that and has seen progress. Perhaps not wonderful progress, perhaps just progress on the notion that homosexuals can survive and should be allowed to live, which is not quite the same thing as saying that all human beings are born and remain equal in rights and dignity, but already something. So this has happened, and there is already something that has happened. I'm also hopeful that the simple fact that there are people voicing their disagreement with this legislation in Uganda, and that there are lawyers invoking basically the constitutional principles, that for me is also a positive sign that people are not taking it. They're not accepting it as something that can't be forced.
Flora, thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to Gracie Brenda, co-founder of the Diverse Empowerment Foundation. Gracie Brenda is Ugandan. Gracie, I hope we can see you. I hope you can hear us, and I hope that we can hear your voice too, because your voice is extremely important. We know that a position has been presented to government in Uganda regarding this new law. Do you feel this will make any difference? Do you feel this petition will at least be read by the government?
I don't know about that, but that gives us hope, and I have confidence in my fellow actors that have put the petition. So at least, even if right now it all looks so grey, I believe that as the world is watching and whatever is happening and all this visibility, the bad visibility that Uganda is getting, that maybe there'll be some justice, since we are humans and it's all about human rights at this point, and it's really not right. So we have hope, and if there is any justice in our country, it will be repealed, and maybe we'll have some kind of breathing space. So it gives us hope, however bleak things may seem right now.
Do you feel that there's going to be a rise in incidents where gay, lesbian, anybody who's different is targeted in Uganda?
Oh, yes, that is with no doubt. So I would like to read to you something that was part of the announcement the Speaker made. The last part was, I now encourage the duty bearers under the law to execute the mandate bestowed upon them in the Homosexuality Act. So if you've been following what was happening in Parliament, at some point, all Ugandans were duty bearers to rid the country of the homosexuals. So when the speaker says something like that, and with the drama and the theatricals they did in Parliament when they were bringing up this and all the bad things they were saying and everything that happened, now every Ugandan feels it's upon themselves to get rid of the homosexuals, to clean up the country. So it will not be just a race in, like, it's not now something that we're going to be talking about, like, there will be a race, there's going to be a race. There is a race right now in the violence. People are
So Gracie, this is the government effectively empowering vigilantes to take it upon themselves and go and attack who they think might be gay, lesbian, or different.
With most people, it's not so much about what they know. When they entrust their people to go to Parliament, I think they believe that these people are higher than them in every way. So when an MP stands in Parliament and says all these disgusting things and says all these things and even condones the death penalty over someone being themselves, this gives people, they think they get the power. And when they're told, because initially they were told, if you see someone who looks gay, okay, I get it's not there now, but initially it was, even if someone looks gay, you can report them, you can do something about it. What does that mean? It means they're giving them the mandate to do something about queer people. And if they're saying all these things, and it's at some point it's centered so much about the children, and as a parent, you'd also get it. And if it were true, and you're not someone who was informed or anything like that, that's the only, you'd have tunnel vision. So now the tunnel vision is getting rid of the homosexuals in the country. And they're the boogeymen, they're the bad people who are causing everything bad in the country. So what does that mean?
It must mean that lots of people are very, very scared right now in Uganda.
I don't know if there's petrified is the word. They are petrified because you can't leave the house. And even if you're in the house, someone comes and says something to your landlord, your landlord is evicting you because they also don't want to pay the penalty or be liable or in any way. Because today, someone called someone's landlord and just told them, if you don't get rid of those people, we're going to come back and burn down your apartments, burn down the building. So now, even if it's you and you're the landlord and this is just a person and then it's your house, you cannot let this person stay. So this person who is hiding in their house now has nowhere to hide. So we are petrified. It's so scary. I don't know how we can begin to explain this because there are no words yet to explain it. But it's so scary, it's so dangerous, it's so bad right now to be identifying as queer in Uganda.
Gracie, what do you want the world to do? What would you like the world, everyone in the world, all the big power politicians, what would you like them to do?
For now, we need somewhere safe. We need a safe space. We need somewhere to run to. We need someone who can do something for us right now so that we feel safe. And I think the starting point is, if I'm on the street, I need to be able to call someone to come and pick me from the street and take me somewhere safe. And I get that doesn't mean that people should come and take us in their countries. We just need somewhere to breathe right now where no one is going to chase us. And I believe if the world still comes out and says something about this, maybe it will also have some effect on the petition, because we do appreciate they tried with the sanctions and apparently that didn't work. But please don't give us on us. Don't give up on us. Keep making this visible. Keep saying something about it. And yes, chase these people from their countries because they're not doing anything for us. instead of building hospitals for them, they're going outside. And if they're coming to your countries and they want their fellow citizens to kill their fellow citizens, but like what is happening to Among to happen to all the MPs and all these people that are all for this, let them stay in their country. Let us die together if we're to die, because if they want to run away, and for us, we can't run away, because you can't say that for the most part, they're saying we're getting support from the West. How is a homeless LGBTQ person getting money to be, what is it called? They keep saying, we are recruited. If I'm recruited and I'm on the street, how is that helping me? So if they're not allowing us to be us, I guess let us be stuck here together. And if we're, I don't know.
Gracie, thank you very much indeed. You've told us some very disturbing things, and I can just basically say, echoing what you said, we will not give up on you. And thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us here in France 24. We appreciate that what you've had to say is difficult and tough, but important as well. Gracie Brenda, co-founder of Diverse Empowerment Foundation, thank you for joining us. Thank you to Christian Rummel of Amnesty International in the Great Lakes region there in Africa, in Nairobi. Thank you, Christian, for joining us. Thank you to Munir Batour in Marseille, co-founder of Shams and a former presidential candidate in Tunisia. Munir, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to Flora Bolter here in the studio from the Fondation Jean Jaurès, co-director of the LGBTQI+ Observatory. Thank you. Thanks to you all for watching. This is the France 24 debate. Stay with us.